Welcome to the off night. We're going to be doing with a special guest, our regular ghost or host, the ghost host, Mr. Jason Grant will be here, and we're also just very cold. I'm just hanging out by my little heater that's gone off for some reason. I'm going to die. Anyway, well, not of cold, but they tried to play in the snow today, and that was the Detroit Tigers. But we're going to get on to the show with Mark Sweetman. Please welcome your host, Mark Sweetman.
All right. Oh, I meant for the music to keep playing on that, but I did. Oh, no, there it is.
There it is.
How about that? All right. Well, now I can take it down. There we go. All right. Thank you. Welcome to the off night. That was my co-host and friend, Andy Jensen. Let me see if I can get him back up here. There we go.
Hi.
This is the off night. We are old comics. Old as in how old we are. Comics and as how funny we are. Not all of us are long-time comics, but guys like Andy and I have been over 30 years doing this. And the off night used to be, now back in the day, how we got the name the off night, back in the day, we would be working 6 or 7 nights a week. So an off night, you'd think would be a big deal that we could be with our families, but we usually would hang out at comedy clubs at open mics and things like that. And so that's how we got the name. We're now in our, I started in 2000. So we're now in our 6th year. Is that right? Wow. April of 2020. And it's now 2025. So that means we've been doing it 5 years. So we're entering our 6th year of doing this. How about that? Wow. Episode 257.
You've got a combination of different people for that long a time, though, too, right?
There have been a combination of different people. I think you've been with us since 2021, I think. And Sam's been with us shortly after that. And then Jason joined us when you found him in a parking lot.
Yeah.
At a I think a laundromat or something.
It was in a bassinet. It was next to a river, and it was sent down by somebody like, I don't know. I saw this woman in reeds, and I was like,
a bassinet.
That's
so funny.
Of course, there's
my wife joined us.
Little horns in his head that kind of went off a little bit, but other than that,
And then Susan joined us about, I think it's been about 3.5 years now, when we discovered that her poetry skills works great for our kickoff. So let's bring Susan out here, because every week she adds a little element to our show. We try to make it our agenda for the evening, because she takes the news headlines, puts them in verse, and it's always very good. At the beginning, it was very funny. Not that she's not funny, but the news is harder to be funny recently. But because she's first a journalist for our purposes, and then a poetess. So anyway, are you ready to give us your poem, Susan?
Sure. I can't always keep it uplifting, but I try and make it not hard news for every story.
It's always good, and we always appreciate the effort. So take it away.
Thank you. Here's your poem ripped from the headlines. Michigan's Governor Whitmer, the Sixth Circuit opinion reveals, the kidnapping plot convictions were upheld by the Court of Appeals. Adam Fox and Barry Croft Jr. will continue to serve their time. It's a federal offense. Will Trump pardon them for their crime? And a nation the United States helped exist nearly 15 years ago, the VP of South Sudan under house arrest, did you know? Political and humanitarian challenges on the brink of civil war. So U.S. added Sudan to the visa ban. Did you expect more? The Dennis the Menace TV show was about a kid who would frustrate. At age 73, actor Jay North now pesters St. Peter at the pearly gate. Upset people gather in all 50 states, and overseas protests was brusque. Hands-off protests continue against Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Some of the signs protesters held tell Trump and Musk to take a hike. Let them eat Teslas. No dictator. And my favorite is Turd Reich. And that's your poem. Those are actual
right,
signs. Actual
Yeah.
signs.
Actually, that was actually very funny.
Thank
Third
you.
right.
Turd Reich. I like that sign. That's the one I should be out there protesting and holding up.
That was good. That was good. So it was the hands-off protest.
They're calling it the hands-off
That's
protest.
what they
It's
call it.
happening in all 50 states plus overseas.
Yeah.
I didn't write down all the countries that are holding them, but people are pretty upset with the United States right now, especially Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Sam hasn't
I
checked in yet,
hope
but
overseas they realize it's not everybody. You know, it's like it's just these two wackos that are doing this.
Yeah.
I think people understand that. What they don't
Well, I'm
understand is
not sure
how.
about that, Mark, because I put, something on one of the social medias about, dear Canada, how, please forgive us, it's not coming from all Americans, something to that effect. And I still got some Trumper comments on there. It's like, yikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was taking people to and from the first opening day game on Tigers, and I had a couple of people in the back. I usually get about 5 or 6 people in the van, and there was a interesting conversation between two friends. They're both smiling at each other. It's like, one was going like, it's terrible thing about Trump. And the guy is kind of just basically said like, oh, Trump's great. It was all like, what? It was like, it was all very smiley. There was like, kind of like, are you, and it kind of, well, okay, we're going to the Tiger game, I guess. Are you sure? It's like, and he's going like Biden stuff. Like, wait a minute, there was inflation. Biden was solving inflation. Oh no, Biden. It was all very like.
Yeah, the facts don't mean anything to some people, but what are you gonna do? I mean, just
everybody in the car looked at him like he was like a flat earther or something like this. Are you kidding? It's like,
aren't they flat earthers?
The world
they
is
are.
Well, there's another crisis, and I opted not to put it in the poem, but children are dying of measles now.
Oh, God, yeah.
So it's bad in Texas.
Well, make sure you get your cod liver oil. That's going to make it helpful, cod liver oil.
Yeah.
Here's the good news. Here's the good news. I guess
150 years ago, people understood that infant mortality was real.
Yeah.
And then we had this, many generations of vaccines to prevent infant mortality. And people in this country don't recognize that how dangerous these childhood illnesses are that are now preventable. And it's just very, very sad. And certainly there are legitimate medical reasons for some children to not get vaccines. Our daughter was one of them. When she had her bone marrow transplant, she could not be revaccinated for the chickenpox vaccine for whatever reason. It was counterindicated. And until such time came that they said she could be vaccinated,
cool.
She couldn't have it. So she was at risk if she had been exposed to chickenpox during the time that she could not be vaccinated. Wow. So, I mean, there are legitimate reasons, but most children do not fall into those medical categories to opt out. It's frightening because it's not, your kid might get measles and be fine, but you might kill somebody else's kid.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah.
Whatever.
Also, it's harsh on the skin. It's all that stuff. But babies can't be vaccinated until until 1 year old, like 6 months. So all those kids who are under the age, and this thing spreads so fast. It spreads by air.
They were saying, and it lingers there for hours after somebody's been there with measles, and it's more contagious. This is a report I read, more contagious than Ebola.
Yeah, it's very
measles. So that's sad news. I didn't put in your poem.
Ah,
This is the best comedy opening ever.
well, we're doing the best we can. We were waiting for you to come and then take on the
Well, did you like
Fox
those?
news approach? Okay.
Did
You
you like
mentioned-
those signs against Trump? I liked Turd Reich.
There's after 10 years of Trump entering the fray, maybe even 12 or 13 if you go back to when he was doubting Obama's birth
Yep.
heritage. What on earth are you going to say to me or anyone that's going to really make that much of a difference? It's just not going to happen. Everything that could be said has been said. Move on. It's sort of like, do you guys remember Clinton derangement syndrome? Do you guys remember that? Because I do.
What's Clinton? Is that the same as Trump?
It was the Trump
syndrome?
derangement syndrome, but it was back when you may remember when Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House, and Bill Clinton was an absolute genius at provoking Newt. He was, and getting Newt to just blow up. Remember when he had to go out the back stairs of Air Force One, and he's whining about that to Barbara Walters, and the thing is, did it ever do any good? Did it make any difference? No, none whatsoever. And then a few years later, after a few years of that kind of thing, then Newt gets blown up over. I can't even remember. Do you guys remember the scandal that blew him out of the speakership? And then
He had an affair for the most part. But
then some guy came in, right? But yeah, we already knew that he divorced his first wife while she was having cancer treatments, and
nobody hears me, right? Is that what
I hear you. No, I hear you.
I hear you.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Okay.
I hear you.
just go ahead.
Oh, because you asked if everybody remembers what it was that blew up Gingrich, and I thought I was speaking. I didn't know if I could be heard or not because everybody kept talking. So, okay. Wasn't he the one who, on his second wife's deathbed, told her that he was marrying his third wife?
Well, I don't know if it was deathbed,
Yeah,
but
that
she was
sounds
getting
about
chemo.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, chemo. Okay.
Something
Chemo,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This was around the same
I remember
time
it was something.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I
Mark,
didn't
go
say
ahead.
anything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Am I on delay or something?
I think
I must be on
there's
delay.
like just a slight little delay. But we also had Senator Widestance back then. Remember Larry Elder, no, not Larry Elder, that's a radio guy. Larry Craig, excuse me, Senator Larry Craig.
From
Who gets
Idaho.
busted. Who gets busted in a Minneapolis airport cruising for
For
dudes.
giving the signal.
For giving the signal.
Yeah.
And I got to ask, Mark, you traveled a lot as a comedian. Did you ever accidentally give the signal?
The funniest thing about that is that I gotta guess he flew through Minneapolis, St. Paul quite a bit, because you never saw more guys dressed as women in the Minneapolis men's room, because that was before the trans would go into the gender preferred restrooms, and so it was basically, it said men and women, but what they meant was innies or outies.
Mhm.
And innie and outie can mean a lot of things. There you go. So I mean, and then he's announcing to guys, I got 2 degrees in economics, and basically most of my economic background or education would hearken to University of Chicago, Milton Friedman. So when you're talking about putting on these tariffs and getting a trade war, you got to understand that's going absolutely 180 degrees against what I was taught.
Milton Friedman would have hated tariffs.
He would have absolutely hated tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's going down this other path. But the thing is, that I think that's important to be remembered is that what, he's going to be there for a while, and there's nothing you can do about it. So what I would be doing if I'm in the Democrat Party, I would be listening to James Carville, who's saying rope-a-dope. Let him punch himself out. Let him step in it. And that's when you have some people and some solutions chambered and ready to go.
Right.
The derangement syndrome is what keeps you away from that.
Well, here's the other thing too. I am not against the tariffs.
Neither
I mean,
am I.
back when we were smashing Japanese cars with sledgehammers, it was the Democrats that were talking about tariffs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember smashing smashing Toyota Tercels with sledgehammers.
Ugh.
Well, I used to drive a Toyota, so
Yeah, and they were good cars. I mean,
I get Volkswagen.
I remember Vincent Chin being beaten to death because people thought he was Japanese here in Detroit, in the Detroit area. So yeah, I mean, the this whole thing has been a real issue for a long time. I mean, if he pulls this off, he'll be the greatest president ever. If he doesn't, he's going to be chased and hounded from office and tarred and feathered. But they've tried that before and it didn't work. But he is a lame duck at this point.
Well, the cases the anti-Trump people give, and I say anti-Trump people, and I'm not making it sound like I'm saying us. I don't want people to think that I'm pro-Trump. I think he is the most despicable man that ever walked the face of the earth. I wouldn't let him near my children. When he does have a grave,
invite him to the house. No, you wouldn't.
When he does have a grave, I will be urinating upon it.
So there's Joe Stalin, Adolf Hitler, but Trump is like sitting above all that.
You know what? Stalin and Hitler had a dog. This man doesn't even have a dog.
Hey, look, Stalin and Hitler didn't have a working democracy to destroy. Okay.
Oh, really? How did Hitler come into power? He was elected.
He was elected, but the problem is he was elected. That democracy was only there for less than 10 years. There wasn't a working democracy before that.
There's a working democracy now.
A 250-year running democracy that this man is trying to destroy.
So the fact that he won the majority votes, that the Republicans won their offices, and let us not forget what then Senator Barack Obama once said to a bunch of Republican luminaries before his elevation to the Kwisatz Haderach phase of his life in January of 2009, when he sat at a private dinner hosted by George F. Will at his private house. Gentlemen, elections have consequences, and I won.
Yeah.
Bush said
I get that. What I'm saying is,
Bush Jr. said
Obama didn't go in and then afterwards try to destroy the government he got elected with.
Let Mark talk. Bush, what were you saying about Bush?
I said Bush said the same thing.
They all say the same thing.
I earned electoral capital, and I intend to spend it.
Yes. Going back to a meeting that occurred in, it was mid-spring 1965, when Clark Clifford was advising Lyndon B. Johnson on Vietnam War policy.
Boy, there's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Clark Clifford said, "Walk away from this. Get away now. Get out of this. This war's a loser." He said, "You have just won a major victory, and you have issued your opponents a defeat they will not soon recover from." And instead, LBJ, instead of listening to that man, he listened to Robert McNamara, and he got his dingus stuck in the ringer of the Vietnam War. And for all the good LBJ did do this country, he also ended up getting us in one of the worst and most divisive wars that I don't think we've quite recovered from since. And sadly, now we're out there throwing military equipment around and military people here and there, but we're really not accomplishing much. We're getting a lot of people killed. You know, we're shooting a lot of bullets. We've got a defense budget 10 times. There's us, and then there's the other 9 below us.
Fought for democracy is the one with Ukraine, and that's the only one that's been happening in the last 30 years that we've done.
Yeah. You mean would that be the government that we deposed in 2012? The one that was democratically elected that we then went out of our way to depose and then put in a government that we actually kind of liked? Do you remember that? The Orange Revolution, I believe it was called.
That was the Ukraine Revolution, yeah.
Yes, exactly. That was the one that we behind the scenes fermented, and so we didn't. No, I'm making that up.
There was a push by Putin to put in this guy that was supposed to be famous for him, and then we wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity for democracy. And
because
they're supposed
goodness
to be
knows
awarded because they took out the when the wall fell, they took out their nuclear weapons. So they were assuming that we were going
no,
to
they didn't take out their nuclear weapons. We had a treaty called the Nunn-Lugar Bill. Perhaps you should look it up. It might do you some good to read history, real history, not just what you get from bumper stickers. And then you would know that, in fact, those weapons belonged to the Soviet Union. Well, well, it's okay for you to come strong, but if I do it, then I'm a bad guy. See, this is what happens. You start talking this stuff, and it's okay for you guys to toss it out, but you get a little back on you, and it's goodbye, good luck. You can look up Nunn-Lugar yourself. It sounds like a craft beer.
This is why I believe that we're going to end in a violent civil war. I think we're going to be killed. I think we're going to be killing each other.
I think you're right, but I hope not. I mean, what you're saying, Mark, what you're saying actually means a lot. It's true. But the thing is, when you really think about what that actually means, it's pretty freaking horrible. And where does it end?
It's horrible for me because
you got kids.
I have kids. I have kids that are targets because they don't look like the rest of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I have, and the rest of the neighborhood has let me know it. And
really?
Oh God, yes.
Dude, I don't live in Livonia, but I mean, I'm well aware of its reputation, if you will.
It's the only thing we have going for us is one of our county prosecutors lives down the block from us, and it's a black woman. So we get pretty good protection around. Oh, and the Wayne County Sheriff lives about another 4.5 blocks past her. So at least the Wayne County Sheriff is a resident in our neighborhood. So that helps a little bit. Yeah. It's like when we lived in Detroit. When we lived in Detroit, they had police. They had a residency rule. Police had to live in the city, so they lived in our neighborhood. And then when they got rid of that rule, the state legislature got rid of that rule. They all moved out to Heartland and Highland and Howell, and our neighborhood went to shit.
Yeah, I was trying to explain to a Japanese gentleman that I had in the car who's going to be living in America for the next year. Detroit and some of its more recent history of the last 50 years, because he was intrigued by he's here to work with Toyota. So he's going to be in the Detroit area, but he is also, like a lot of folks, believing that Detroit is some sort of bullet-ridden gangster haven, and parts of Detroit are not particularly great, but parts of Detroit are absolutely as safe as milk.
This is somebody who's not from here, though, right?
No, he's Japanese. He's Japanese.
Oh. Well, they have a lot of folklore in Japan also.
Well, that's my point. He's been the recipient of sort of the reputational aspects of Detroit, as has been portrayed in the media for the past 50 years. I mean, how about this, Mark? How many times did you have to use this when you were in some marginal situations where you had to say, hey, listen, pal, I'm from Detroit. I mean, you can say I'm from Ann Arbor, and they're going to yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Good for you.
Good. That's fine. You're from Ann Arbor. I still am not going to park your car.
Exactly. Exactly. When you say I'm from Detroit.
Park your own damn car.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's... for generations now, my Uncle Eric Lee got shot to death in Baltimore.
Oof.
But until we adopted black kids from the east side of Detroit, we didn't have any family members that were shot.
Yeah.
And it was just like a matter of course, and I can see why that would frighten people, but it doesn't frighten them in the right way. It doesn't. There seems to be and this is the what do they call it? The racism that they call it, not the opposite of overt. It's systemic. The systemic racism is that people want to attribute that to race because it happens in black communities more than it happens in other communities. And it isn't that at all. I think it has more to do with the hopelessness
Yeah.
of seeing generational destitution and the availability of guns.
Well, this ties us back into this whole tariffs things and what's going on. There's been some people. You're familiar with Gary, Indiana. We all are around here.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it makes
Been there.
Detroit look like the garden spot, right? And if you look back into
yeah, and it
Gary,
smells a lot. It smells a lot worse than Detroit
well,
too.
that was always the sort of the inside joke. But the thing is, if you go back and look, it was a company town, but people lived there. People owned their own houses there. They had a educational system there, and violence was not. It was not like it is now. What you're talking about, especially with the gun violence, is a relatively new phenomenon. Oh, I was listening to I trying to George Benson, who grew up in and around Pittsburgh. And he was talking about, back in the day, you might have had some street fights or some fist fights here and there, but you didn't have people shooting at each other. It was a rarity.
Yeah.
It was uncommon. And you know what? It's because people had jobs. People bought their houses. Black people, white people, everyone else. They had things to do. They had kids to grow up. They had school and whatnot. And more often than not, you had we've harped on this so many times, but it's so true. One job, one guy working, one woman working at a factory, and you could get a house and a car and clothes for your kids.
At one time, now it hasn't been 2 million since I've been alive. It was like when I was a kid, it was 1.8 million people lived in Detroit, and the home ownership rate was like 90%.
Yeah, people own their houses.
People own their houses, and because I owned homes in Detroit, and I saw how it was done, a lot of it has to do with the deterioration of Detroit. It has to do with the tax laws that allowed people to move out of Detroit, maintain the house as a rental. And so you were renting these things to people that didn't have
a stake
to piss in. They didn't have a stake in it. And we were still given, because we had 200 Detroit, we were given these tax breaks on it as a business. They treated and homes really shouldn't have been treated as a business as such, the same way you treat depreciating tractors and factories and things like that. But they would do that because you were using it for income. You could depreciate your home, and so a lot of times they just gave homes away. They just let them go.
And you remember redlining too.
Yeah, once the landlord got everything he could get out of it,
right?
There was no reason to sell it. They've already made their money on it.
And at the same time, if you're on the wrong side of a line, your insurance for your car was up, your payments for your car were higher.
Yeah, insurance in Detroit is still ridiculous.
Yes, it is, and also the sort of anti-redlining. If you're on the other side of a line, your interest payments on your house were lower.
Well, here's another thing that's come up recently, because we never had this when I was a kid. My kids are seeing this now. The banks now, unless you have $1,500, my kids have, a couple of my kids have Chase accounts. That's only because they didn't open they started off with a boatload of money because they had generous relatives for their graduation parties. Gave them nice big checks, so they had enough money to open up a checking account at Chase Bank. But Chase will not give you free checking unless you have like a $500 a month auto deposit, meaning a job or a government check, or you have $1,500 minimum balance maintained. That dips below $1,500, boom, there you go. There's your $35 monthly charge.
And speaking as someone who, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I'm someone who's like $1,500 is a life-changing amount of money. I have lived and functioned under the poverty line for the better part of 20 years now. So you know what a barrier, not a barrier, but you know what a bar that is.
Well, I was a stand-up. I wasn't a headline comedian when I started.
No.
I wasn't really a headliner until I was 34, 35 years old.
Right.
And so I was always under that line. When we lived in California, Susan and I only had catastrophic care.
Yep.
Like if we got if we got hit by a car or something like that,
Yeah.
would take care of us. But our kids were all on what they called Cal Kid,
Yeah.
California insurance for kids under 18. And so that was the only way we could afford insurance for them. And here's the kicker on this. Oh, you'll love this as a Republican.
As an evil
I'm saying
conservative.
I'm saying that, no, I'm saying that sarcastically. You're not going to love this. We had to around July. We had to decide in July or August how much into September and October I was going to work.
Yep.
Because the way it worked out was, if I made too much money, that I would no longer qualify for these government insurance programs.
Right.
That I would actually stop working.
Yeah.
Sometime around the equinox.
Yep.
and then for the rest of the year, I'd write, I'd audition for parts, I'd do other things that wasn't necessarily income producing, or like we did a lot of holiday shows.
Right.
And we had a lot, and they wrote mostly for companies.
Right.
And so a lot of these companies didn't necessarily have a budget for it.
Right.
And so they said, can you do the show and we'll pay you for it in January? Well, I was like, hell yeah, because now I didn't have to worry about going over my annual revenue for the year in order to keep my programs.
Right.
And
get a little deferred compensation.
Deferred compensation. I used to think, for me, it worked out, but I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking, well, you shouldn't encourage people not to make money, because it's going to cost them money.
No, you shouldn't. And the thing is, I'm not the biggest fan of well, I can't stand socialized medicine, but the fact of the matter is, you can't have kids uninsured. You can't have, you cannot, it's bad for the overall economy if your children are not getting good medical care. Well, old people, we could sell to a dog food factory, but.
Well, that's the thing is, actually, if you think about it, when you think of how the most expensive health care is everybody over 65, and that's who we give health care to. And probably the cheapest ones are the ones who are under 21.
Right. So spending a little bit of money on them is going to go a little further.
Well, that's the way we look. That's also why we give them free public education. Because
as well, and we're a rich country. We can afford these things. We should afford them. Simply because I'm not the biggest fan of our delivery system doesn't mean that we shouldn't have these policies in place to help people out. I mean, that this is how society grows. I am not one who wants to live in some sort of Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged universe where we're all making the sign of the dollar and living in a pure capitalist environment. I mean, have you ever read Ayn Rand? Oh my God, you'll
you mean the Fountainhead? The
Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. That Ayn Rand. Yes, right. that one. Yes, I mean, she's great. If you need some historical flourishes,
that's Paul Rand Paul's fairy godmother, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure he probably had an Atlas Shrugged mobile above the crib. That sort of thing. Sort of like the bassinet they had in Rosemary's Baby, but with a picture of Ayn herself. God, what an incredible movie. What's wrong with his eyes? Oh, he has his father's eyes.
Oh God. Now that was a frightening movie. That one kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Ruth Gordon as a devil worshiper. The thought of her prancing around naked with her husband doing some sort of black mass was enough to
was Hume Cronin in that too? Was that played her husband?
I don't think that was her husband. Maybe that was.
I think that was Hume Cronin. I can look. There's what we got Google for. I can look that up.
There you go. It wasn't Garson Kane. I'll vamp for a minute while you look it up. Let's not forget that John Cassavetes also has not a huge but an important role in that movie.
Yeah, he played the father.
Yeah, he played her husband, and he had no problem pimping the wife out to Satan, in order to, as you guys would call him, Trump.
I forgot about this. Well, Wow. Ralph Bellamy was the doctor.
Yep, Dr. Saperstein.
Saperstein, yep. And what's his name? Charles Grodin, Dr.
Yep.
Hill.
Yep.
And where Ruth Gordon? No, Sidney Blackmer was Ruth Gordon's husband.
Okay.
Who else we got in here that was anybody?
That was, if I'm not mistaken, an Ira Levin book. I don't know if he wrote the screenplay.
I could probably find out on this page here. Sharon Tate was in that.
She was? She have a
Sure
cameo? Because obviously Mia Farrow was the
yeah, that's why the cult went after Sharon Tate. They couldn't get Mia Farrow's address.
Well, she was living with Frank at the time. I mean, how are you going to get to her that way?
Oh, exactly.
You know.
Well, Roman Polanski was the director.
Yeah.
Oh, Rosemary's Baby. Let's see the writer. Let's see if I can find the.
I wonder if he used the Rosemary's Baby dating service to some point later on.
Oh God.
Well, there's another guy who went on the total. I mean, come on, he drugged a 13-year-old girl and had his way with her, and yet for years afterwards in Hollywood, they were still feting him. And granted, he wouldn't show up for the award program because it would have led to his immediate apprehension. But
you mean giving him nominations and stuff?
That, I mean, he actually won an Academy Award, about 10, 15 years ago. And I know Meryl Streep was up there speaking of him in glowing terms. And you know what, Meryl Streep is probably the greatest American actress of the last 100 years. Roman
Polanski was the screenwriter for.
He adapted it. Okay. He wrote that.
And it was based on Ira Levin's book.
Yep.
Now.
I mean, it's a very bitter satire, to say the least. And the building they're talking about was essentially, if I'm not mistaken, the Dakota building.
It was the Dakota.
It was the Dakota?
Yeah,
okay.
It was.
Yeah, and that was, as we know, that's also where John Lennon got 5 bullet holes and Yoko Ono didn't even get a powder burn, which goes to show you there's no fairness in the world.
It was considered a box office success when it grossed over $30 million. Now they have a $30 million weekend. They're upset,
Well, I mean, when you spend, let me see, they're talking about the new Snow White movie, had a production budget of over $300 million. Then you toss in marketing and distribution, that's another $300 million. So yeah, $600 million movies.
Susan and I had a night off last week, and we went out to see a movie. And this is the first time I think we've seen more than 2 movies in a 12-month period at the theater, because the screens at home are so good now and you can get just about everything. But we went and saw, we're scrolling through the films, and we had a gift card from the kids, one from Christmas, and so we're limited by the theater. So I see this one, and it says comedy Paul Rudd. So we went to see Death of a Unicorn. And it was a comedy the way Get Out comedy. It was very dark, but there's parts where you normally would scream or grab your chair or jump and things like that.
Yeah,
where we're laughing hysterically because it was just a very dark type of humor.
Well, God, I'm trying to think of the last really good comedy that I had. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but over the weekend, I bumped into this on television. They were playing Blazing Saddles
on TV.
On TV, and they weren't bleeping anything.
It must have been streaming then. It wouldn't have been a broadcast, right?
I remember there were a commercial break or two, but I mean,
they have commercial breaks on streaming services.
Oh, okay.
Even Hulu has commercials, So.
Oh my Lord. But they were leaving in all the N-bombs, all the original script, which to me, with that movie, that's kind of the point of it. I mean, that's written by Richard Pryor, even though he took his name off the script because he didn't get the lead role in it.
His name was on the script.
It is now?
If you look at the old movie posters, yeah. Because I remember seeing it. I remember seeing it when it was out because I was I was a comedy aficionado by that time. By that time, I had been
Yes.
introduced to Bill Cosby and George Carlin, and Richard
Right.
Pryor was a step. At 14, Richard Pryor was the next, so
Yes.
I knew who that was.
Well, I remember Sammy Davis Jr. having it was during the summer, and he had a talk show on Sunday nights, sort of late. So you remember how bad programming was in the early 70s on Sunday night on our 3 channels. You were lucky to
we had
get.
the NBC mystery movie on Sunday nights.
No, I'm talking about after 11 p.m. I'm talking late night. I'm talking.
David Susskind. We had David
Yeah.
Susskind and what else?
We-
Luke Gordon.
Yes.
He was Saturday.
Luke Gordon. Saturday night, Lou Gordon.
Lou Gordon and the Ghoul on Saturday night.
And the Ghoul. Well, at least you had the Ghoul. I mean, and you also had Jackie Gordon reading the mail. I mean, of course, Lou for years lived off blowing up George Romney's presidential run. He went on the Lou Gordon show and said, "Yeah, maybe I have been brainwashed." And it's like, okay, well, there goes your presidential nomination. And 68. Ronald Reagan gave it a try. It didn't quite work out for him, but that's all right. He came back a couple elections later. He was fine. But yeah, God, that what am I trying to get to? And Richard Pryor was on this really bad, low budget Sammy Davis Jr. syndicated talk show on Sunday nights. And he's talking to Sammy. He goes, "So I hear you wear pantyhose." And Sammy goes, "Yes, I do. I wear them for chafing or something like that." And he later on just goes, "I'm not no queer N-word." Only he didn't say N-word right to the man's face. At the time, he was like pouring champagne into his guest's shoe and drinking it, and it was true Richard Pryor when he was perhaps at his most unbound, shall we say. And the kind of thing that would never ever happen nowadays. Something like that would never make it to the air. But yet it was the 70s. I mean, in many ways we were actually kind of freer then with our language and our attitudes, and I maybe we were better off. We weren't trying to kill each other, at least. At least we understood that there were bigger fish to fry. And I mean, Pryor used to get into white people's crap all the time, and we loved it. We paid money to go see him. I mean, because he was funny and he was telling the truth.
Now Dave Chappelle's doing the same thing, and he gets canceled for it. So
yes, I mean, and Chappelle is a guy I can't watch because he's just so good. I would steal everything I could from him. Because what do you do when you see? So by the way, you're a pro. I mean, did you ever see someone you just go, "Oh my God, that's just eye-watering good. Why didn't I write that?" I mean,
Rich Jenny.
Yes.
And the thing was, I worked with him about 4 times on the road, and that back then the road meant you were sometimes 6 or 7 days together. You were either in what they called a comedy condo together,
right,
or they put you in the same hotel room. And so I got to see his work habits, and this guy was a professional comedian in a sense that I've never seen a professional comedian. I mean, I saw some guys, they would get their 45-minute act and they'd hit the road and they were great at it. But it was, you saw them 7 years later, same 45 minutes. Richard Jenny was writing a new Showtime special every week. I mean, that's how much volume he had. He should have been a television. So if he had been around in this era, back when they did with Roseanne Barr and Tim Allen and Drew Carey, tried to take their characters and write shows around them. And he was so much more than that. He was just such a great observer of everything. And so he didn't really have a character other than critic. He was sort of like a social, a human critic, sort of like, here's what I see, here's why it's funny, here's why you should think it's funny too. That was pretty much the premise of everything he ever wrote. But it would just go off in way different directions. The thing he did about the left, the right, and the center, And I don't even think he said anything that was that political. He just called it left, right, center. It was you that would make it political in your mind as you.
Yes.
But he did you ever see that where he runs back and forth across the stage?
I didn't see that one. One of my favorite bits of his where he's talking about being at the restaurant, talking about the lobster and becoming a Roman emperor. You know, it's just like, oh yes, the red one, he amuses me. Throw him into the pot. And that one over there, throw him into the pot of boil. The family across the way, they're irritating. Throw them into the pot of boiling water. And you know, he had a way of doing. He had these voice characterizations, and he was
yes,
and
these
mannerisms.
By working with him for a week, you just got to see some of these things develop.
Right.
You know, and you could tell when he was done developing a bit, because then it wasn't worked on stage. And the thing is, he didn't do open mics like we do to work on stuff. He did all this stuff during his act. So he killed to open, killed to close. That was he knew that he had to open strong,
right,
give the people what they want, and at the end make them remember him. But it was in that middle part where he'd kind of like work on this new stuff.
Right.
And the genius of it was to be able to, and he never wanted to take notes up on stage, but he always had them on stage, backstage before he went on. And then right when he came off, he'd go over his notes and he'd mark things up and stuff. I mean, he was working when everybody else was out there trying to get their ass kissed by the club owners and the audience. He was working on his material. You know?
Well, one thing I respect Bill Maher for, and I heard him a couple years back, and Bill Maher was talking about how he can't stand the comedians who are bringing notebooks on stage. You know, and Maher, I might not agree with him politically, but he's a comedian's comedian. He's an absolute. He's a beast. I mean, he is a genuine professional, and he's talking about, no, these people paid money. They're coming to your show. They expect to see you. They don't want to see you fumbling around in your little book, coming up with routines on this, you know, and because I mean, I always remember being tickled with Maher long before he got his talk show, and
I think what put him over was he did the Carson show and he did the bit about going to confession as an Irish Jewish kid. Did you ever hear that bit?
No, I like it though. I like the setup.
He says, well, I came from a mixed marriage. My mother's Jewish, my father's Irish Catholic. Because I was raised Catholic, but I was sort of raised. I was raised as a Jew Catholic. He says every weekend I'd go to confession. I'd say, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I think you know my attorney, Mr. Cohen." like he's in the confessional with him. He did that on Carson, and Carson just you know how Carson will sometimes fall out of its chair. Right. And he did that, and Carson just loved that. And that Bill was on his way after that.
Yeah. And again, back in a time where if Johnny asked you to come over to the couch, and again, Johnny being very self-aware at that point, he knew exactly what he was doing and how different someone's life was going to be the next day.
And you know what? There's not anybody like Johnny Carson anymore. Everybody talks about, you know, there's just too many of them, but not one of these 5 or 6 that are out there right now break comics the way Carson used to.
Joe Rogan did for a while. Unfortunately, in the last year and a half, so much politics swirled around his podcast, which, by the way, I don't think Rogan really wanted. Rogan was in 16 and in 20 was a big Bernie bro. You know, he's not a rock rib Republican by any stretch.
You know, Rogan,
and he had. That's where I got to see a lot of new comedians were on his show. You know,
if his co-star hadn't been shot,
right?
Phil Hartman, they were on that show,
News Radio,
and Phil Hartman got shot by his wife.
Yep, Bree,
and that pretty much put an end to that show.
Sadly, yeah.
I mean, they tried to do another season, but it was, you know,
with John Lovitz didn't work, and
yeah, exactly. But anyway. But Joe Rogan was on that show, and if that show had gone on and made it, and he could have been like Woody Harrelson now, you know what I mean? Because he had that type of part on News Radio, like the Woody Harrelson type of character, and he would have been competing with those kind of. he would have never had this podcast. The podcast was something for him to do
Yes.
while he was waiting for his next acting gig, and it just blew up.
And for a long time, his podcast was just him and an iPhone talking to people. I mean, it was an audio podcast for a long time. It wasn't even an audio visual thing. Brian Redbane became his producer, and that's when they started to get. But for the longest time, that's where I learned about like guys like Theo Vaughn. Trying to think of some of the newer comedians that have come up. Bert Kreischer, who I'd never heard of until I saw him. Oh gosh, the other guy. I'm trying to think of his name. He's big now. And if I could remember his name, I suppose he'd be even bigger. But my point was, it was still very much a comedian's talk show. It wasn't about getting into. I mean, you guys were mentioning vaccines and whatnot, and you know, as someone who like I remember being vaxxed as a kid, in the little stall there, you know, getting my measles.
I still think I have my marks from my shots.
Yeah, your little scars.
Although
on
my
your
newest mark right here, this one right here, I got. They had to take some basal cells out of me this winter from. I got to be careful on the boat. I got to have more covering and more sunscreen.
Yeah.
I'm at risk of melanoma now with all that sun.
Melanoma now. Yeah, we're getting to be that age, I know. But I mean, I've never had any use for anti-vaxxers. Unfortunately, vaccines have become rather, again, way too political, and why we can't sit there and discuss it, I do not understand. It makes no sense to me.
Here's something I haven't told a lot of people, and now I'm going to say it on our podcast. So I guess the potential is that everybody will know this, but I really never got flu shots or vaccines once I got them for college, the ones I needed to get to go to college.
Right.
That they required where I went to school.
Yeah.
And really didn't have any use for vaccines or flu shots or anything until 2021 when the COVID vaccine came out.
Right.
And I've gotten all four of the boosters so far. I haven't had any ill effects, and now I'm getting a flu shot every year. I never got a flu shot. I said, well, if I get the flu, I'll get over it. I'll just get sick like I always do and spend 5 days in bed and then crawl out like I always do. But then I had about 5 people at my church die from COVID. I go, I think I'll start taking the flu shot.
Well, no, and that's the thing. I would take a flu shot. I won't take the COVID vaccine because, amongst other things, it has HIV strands in it that they use to engineer. That's what. That doesn't really.
Well, I guess at my age, you know what I'm thinking. I'm also thinking at my age,
right?
A lot of times, here's what they don't do that they should do. They should take a history of people and what they've had and what they haven't had, and they should. We should have a blood sample of everybody. That should be part of the census. Is get everybody's.
Well, the thing is, I mean, HIV. I mean, I have memories of that, and even though it was horrible, it did make apartment shopping easier at a certain point. It's like, geez, it's terrible to hear that. Listen, I heard you put new wallpaper in not too that long ago. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's like the old Jackie, the guy that used to write for Kern. The guy in New York, the king of all media.
I'll just write for Howard Stern.
Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Jackie Martling.
Jackie the Joke Man Martin. Yes.
Yeah, I've worked with when he was still doing comedy before he had the full-time radio gig. He was doing stand-up comedy. I worked with him a couple times. He said, things you don't want to say to the widow at a funeral. Do you know of any job openings?
Tom Segura is the guy I was thinking of.
Tom Segura. Yeah,
who was also. I mean, he'd been around and whatnot, but Eddie Ifft was another guy who I picked up from Rogan's podcast.
Now, is Eddie Ifft? Am I thinking who's the guy who's now trans?
Oh, you're thinking of Eddie Izzard.
Eddie Izzard.
Izzard, who again, brilliant comedian.
Did you ever? He did a show where he and his wife were gypsies. Did you ever see that? And they used
No,
to people. I
but
wish I could name it because I watched the. I didn't think I was going to like it, but after a couple episodes, I go, "Oh, I'm going to finish this. This is great."
he also did, and if Andy is still listening, he's the
And
only one who ever did a James Mason impression that was as good as Andy's,
oh,
which is saying something. And there's not a lot of demand for James Mason impressions, but for some of it, it's like, can you do a good Max von Sydow for me?
worked with a guy. I worked with a guy from Dallas. Didn't I mean he? I think he ended up doing some acting, but you wouldn't know. His name was Greg Travis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was a regular at the Improv, But again, a no name. You know what I mean? A lot of these guys went through, made a good living at it, made six figures. You never heard of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what it was like back in the '80s, right? So anyway, but he did my favorite all-time James Mason impression. He goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, James Mason in the role of Mo Howard in the Three Stooges." And he would turn,
Larry.
He would comb his hair forward to give it the Mo cut and everything. He'd turn around and go, "Larry, Curly, I'm going to have to poke you both in the eyes now." God, I love that.
I still love
Larry,
Jack Warden
Curly,
talking about
I'm going
him
to have to poke you both in the eyes now.
in The Verdict when he goes, "Yeah, he's pretty good. Good. He's the fucking Prince of Darkness." I mean, and Mason plays that role as villain in the Verdict beautifully. I mean, in North by Northwest when he plays Martin Landau's gay lover, that I think that's made pretty clear if one watches the movie that Martin Landau's character is a little smitten with with James Mason, but we weren't allowed to talk about such things, much like when we see Masala in Ben-Hur,
Right.
gazing at Chuck Heston there as he's rather breathily.
You know what we should do? We should go to the Redford Theater, the Michigan Theater, in Ann Arbor, somewhere we could have the whole theater. And I like the Redford, even though I like. Here's how much I love the Redford. They're in a shitty neighborhood and they still draw crowds.
Love it.
I know it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like people. It's just a horrible neighborhood. I mean, it's got so much potential, but it's a place where I'd like to have like a hidden Hollywood or something like the films that you didn't know were gay, and then just
Right.
have little discuss, because they always do an interview, or not an interview. They always do an intermission at the Redford Theater, where they talk about the film and some of the things, like some of the backstory, some of the things that went into production and stuff like that.
Right.
And they always, and for at least 3 times a year, they'll have stars in from the films to talk about this stuff during like a question and answer thing. So,
well, movies like, for instance, The Boys in the Band, which was clearly a gay movie. I mean, there's obviously pretty wide open on that one there.
If it was any gayer, it would have flown. It would have flown.
I mean,
away.
you would have come out with Crisco all over yourself. I mean, it would have just been terrifying. But my point was that was when in order to let you know if this is a gay movie, the guys were talking with major lisps and affect and and very swish, and there was other stuff that was not. It was not quite like that, shall we say? It sounds like I hear the music.
You know what that means?
I know what that means. Time for you.
Do you have a time now? Do you have a timer on your screen like I do?
It's telling me that it's live and that we're at 59 minutes and some number of seconds.
Okay, so you get the same timer I got. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah. That means we got about less than half a minute left. So I just want to tell everybody we're here every Monday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Pacific. And you know what? If you're somewhere else, figure it out. But this is on. Oh, I forgot to put that on. Let me put my banner on here. I created. We talked about this for years. I finally got it. There's the banner. That's the address that all of our recordings are. So if you want to catch this one live, it's YouTube at Off Mic /streams. I used to have to go in and put the link in all the time, which one up there. But this page, YouTube, it's our. I have to hear the page of the office. You go to that stream section, it has all of our episodes. And so this one will stay in the latest until next Monday, when the next one will replace that, and they just get pushed off to its own. So, all right, I've taken up a half a minute to explain what could have taken 15 seconds. And this is Jason. He stayed with me the whole night. Sam, sorry you couldn't make it. Andy, sorry you couldn't handle it. But
let's be nice to Andy. Come on.
Well, you were kind of mean.
I know, but by the same token, you guys come after me, hammer and tong every fucking time. I sit here and take it.
Yeah, you do. And you know what? When I turn the show off and I go to pick up my son at work, I forget all about that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I just forget all about it. Anyway, it's time to go, and the music is out. So we'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Yep. Goodbye.